She mocked my job, cheated with her boss, now I own the company. You'll never get ahead working like that, she said, tossing the words over her shoulder like a joke. But I knew she wasn't kidding. She said it with a smirk, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. We were sitting at our tiny kitchen table eating takeout I had picked up after my evening shift. I was working long hours at a local repair shop, nothing flashy, just honest work with grease on my hands and sweat on my back. And to her, that wasn't enough. She had started working at a big corporate firm a year earlier, and ever since then she talked differently. Walked differently. Treated me differently. Suddenly, my stories didn't matter, my job didn't matter, my effort didn't matter. She'd come home glowing after office happy hours, talking about how driven her colleagues were, how her boss understood ambition, how I just didn't get it. At first, I brushed it off. I figured it was just stress, or maybe a phase. People go through changes, right? But then she stopped looking at me the same way. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped saying we when talking about the future. I felt it happening, like a slow, invisible leak in the foundation of something I had once thought was solid. And then came the lie that broke it all. One night she told me she had to stay late at work for a project. I believed her. I brought her coffee. I even left her a note in the cup holder with a little smiley face and a stupid line like, "Don't forget how amazing you are." But when I walked through the building's parking garage, I saw her car parked 2 levels below the office floor. And next to it? Her boss. I didn't confront her that night. I waited. I let it stew. I needed to know for sure before I said anything. The next day, I made a fake profile and followed her on a new social platform she didn't know I used. It didn't take long. Photos. Comments. Inside jokes. She didn't even try to hide it well. She was treating their affair like it was some exclusive club I didn't have the credentials to join. And maybe in her eyes, I didn't. I was just the guy with a wrench while he wore tailored suits and took her to wine tastings after meetings. I confronted her 3 days later. Sat her down and asked one question, "Is there someone else?" She hesitated. Lied. I asked again. This time I saw it in her face, the twitch in her lip, the flicker in her eyes. I already knew the truth. I just wanted to hear her say it. Eventually she did. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with this cold kind of pity and said, "We're not in the same league anymore. I need someone who understands where I'm going." I'll never forget those words. Not because they hurt, though they did, but because in that moment I realized something. She hadn't just given up on us. She had given up on me. Not because I was lazy, not because I didn't care, but because my grind didn't look good in pictures. My ambition wasn't glossy enough for her Instagram. She moved out 2 weeks later. Took her clothes, her makeup, her laptop, and left me standing in a quiet apartment that suddenly felt twice as empty. And you know what? That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because when you hit bottom like that, when someone spits on everything you've worked for, you either break or you rebuild. And I didn't break. I got up early, worked late, but I wasn't just fixing engines anymore. I was learning. I started reading business books, taking online courses at night, networking with people who didn't care what I wore or where I came from, only what I could do. I took every insult she threw at me and turned it into fuel. Every comment about me not being enough became a reason to push harder. At first, it was slow. I saved every extra dollar. Sold my car to invest in better tools. Partnered with an old friend who had similar dreams. We started small, 1-bay garage, 3 clients. But the work was good. Word spread. Clients returned. We reinvested everything. No vacations. No weekends off. Just vision. Just grind. And as the business grew, so did I. Not just in success, but in silence. I never posted. Never bragged. Never reached out to her. But I knew one day our paths would cross again. And when they did, she wouldn't be looking down at me anymore. She'd be looking up. Way up. The first year after she left was brutal. Not because I missed her, but because I had to unlearn everything I had accepted as normal. I had built my life around proving my worth to someone who only valued surface success. For too long, I thought working hard and staying loyal would be enough. I thought that being dependable, consistent, grounded, that those things mattered. But when she walked out, she made it clear, what I offered wasn't flashy, wasn't exciting, wasn't worth sticking around for. And that rejection, sharp as it was, became the fire I needed. My business partner and I moved quickly. We reinvested every cent we earned back into the garage. New equipment, better lighting, a cleaner waiting area. We hired one guy, then another. We brought in a consultant to help us with branding and SEO so people could actually find us online. Suddenly, we weren't just those guys who fixed stuff fast. We were a growing name in the city's automotive scene. And the craziest part? I loved it. Not just the growth but the work. The learning, the experimenting, the freedom. I'd go to sleep exhausted, but for the first time in years, it was the kind of exhaustion that felt good. Like I had emptied everything into something that mattered. There were still moments, late at night, when her words echoed in my mind. We're not in the same league anymore. I'd hear them, and instead of letting them sting, I'd smile. Because she was right. But not in the way she thought. After 18 months, we opened our second location. A sleek, modern shop in the heart of the business district, the kind of area she once said I'd never understand. It had floor-to-ceiling glass windows, high-end detailing bays, and a front desk that looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a garage. We catered to a different kind of client now: CEOs, financial advisors, entrepreneurs. People who wanted performance vehicles, custom tuning, long-term service contracts. And I treated every client like they were family. That's what set us apart. It was during one of our soft opening events that I saw someone I hadn't thought about in a while, her former boss. The same man she left me for. He walked in with a fake confidence, the kind that melts the second it's challenged. He didn't recognize me right away. Probably didn't expect to see the grease monkey hosting a champagne launch in a building he didn't own. But I recognized him. I waited for him to approach the counter. I let one of my team members give him the pitch, show him the package options. He listened politely, trying to keep up. And then he looked around the shop, I scanning the crowd like he was trying to figure out who was running the place. That's when I stepped forward. He blinked. "Wait, you look familiar." "Yeah," I said calmly. "I used to bring your favorite coffee to the office. Remember? When I was just the guy she couldn't bring to corporate events." His face dropped. He stumbled over his words, then laughed nervously. "Wow, you really turned things around." "I didn't turn around," I replied. "I leveled up." He nodded slowly, suddenly quieter. I wasn't angry. I didn't need to be. That moment spoke for itself. The power shift was so obvious it didn't require gloating. I offered him a handshake. "Thanks, by the way," I said. "If it wasn't for you, I might still be stuck proving myself to someone who never saw my worth." He shook my hand, unsure whether to feel insulted or impressed. I didn't wait for him to decide. I walked away. Later that night, I got a message. It was from her. Just one line: "I heard about your shop, it's beautiful." No apology. No explanation. Just that thin thread, tossed out into the dark, hoping I'd grab it. But I didn't. She had made her choices. So had I. And now I was playing in a different league altogether. One she never had the patience to wait for. One she'd never be invited into again. The irony? She helped build this version of me through every insult, every dismissal, every time she made me feel small. She handed me the fire. I just chose to let it burn brighter than she ever imagined. The message from her sat in my inbox for days. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. I just left it there like an artifact from a life I no longer belonged to. It wasn't that I hadn't imagined this moment before, her realizing what she threw away, her trying to creep back into my world, but when it actually happened, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt empty. Like a scene I'd already outgrown before it could be filmed. She had once been everything to me, my partner, my confidant, my future. And now? She was just another ghost of my past. I didn't hate her. I didn't need to. Because when you've truly moved on, when you've rebuilt from rock bottom and climbed higher than you ever thought possible, there's no room for resentment. Only distance. And mine was measured in miles of progress she'd never catch up to. While she was watching from the sidelines, I kept building. The third location of our company opened 6 months after that message. Bigger than the others. More modern. A full-service experience with a cafe, a client lounge, and a custom-designed center for high-end vehicle mods. Our name was starting to appear in magazines, blogs, and even a few TV spots. We had a waiting list for certain services. What started as a two-man hustle in a dingy garage had become a small empire. And I hadn't just built a business, I had built a version of myself that didn't flinch at memories anymore. I remember one evening, as I was leaving the shop, I got stopped by a young guy, maybe 23, college hoodie, nervous smile. "Hey," he said. "You're the owner, right?" I nodded. He went on to tell me how he'd followed our story online, how I was the reason he left his boring desk job and started working with his hands again. He said I made it look possible. Real. Like people who weren't born rich could still rise if they were willing to bleed for it. I shook his hand, gave him a few words of encouragement, and drove home that night with a quiet sense of pride. Not because I was a role model, but because I had become someone I would have looked up to when I was struggling. And yet, every now and then, she would resurface. A message on a holiday. A reaction to a public post. An occasional, just checking in that felt more like a fishing line than genuine concern. She never directly apologized. Never owned what she did. Just floated around the edges, hoping I'd be the one to reopen the door. But I had boarded it shut long ago. One day, our paths crossed in person. It was at a networking event downtown hosted by a luxury auto brand. I was invited as one of the featured vendors, one of their partners in innovation. She was there too, standing in a sleek black dress, laughing at something someone said. The moment our eyes met, her smile froze. She walked over slowly, unsure of herself. I stayed still, calm. I had nothing to run from anymore. "You've changed," she said, looking me up and down. "You look different." "I am," I said simply. She laughed nervously. "I've followed your work. I've seen your name in articles. You're really doing it. Doing what you said I couldn't?" I asked. Not as a jab, just a fact. She didn't answer. Her expression shifted, a mixture of awe and something else. Regret? Maybe. But it was too late. That version of me, the one who once would have melted at her praise, was long gone. She started talking about her job, how things had stalled, how the company wasn't what it used to be, how her boss, him, had moved to another firm and things had never been the same. I just listened, hands in my pockets, letting her speak into the space that no longer belonged to her. Then she said it. "I've thought about us. About how things ended. I was stupid. You didn't deserve that." I nodded. "No, I didn't." There was a long pause. She looked around like she couldn't quite believe the moment she had imagined was actually happening. "Do you ever think about trying again?" I smiled. Not cruelly. Just with the ease of someone who had already made peace. "No," I said. "Because I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." And with that, I thanked her for saying what she said, wished her well, and walked away. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I had already won the moment I stopped needing her validation. That night, I went home to a quiet apartment overlooking the city skyline. I poured a drink, sat on the balcony, and watched the lights blink across the buildings. I wasn't the man she mocked, the man she left, or the man she doubted. I was the man who kept showing up even when no one else believed. The man who chose growth over bitterness. And that choice? It had made all the difference. Somewhere along the way, my story stopped being about her. That was the real breakthrough. For a long time, even after she left, I was still living in the shadow of her rejection. Everything I did felt like a reaction, like I was trying to prove something to someone who wasn't watching anymore. But as time passed, something shifted. I wasn't building just to prove her wrong. I was building because I had finally remembered what it felt like to believe in myself. The motivation became internal. Quiet. Steady. And it gave me peace in a way I never thought possible. The business flourished, but so did I. I began investing in other ventures, small startups, a mentorship program for underprivileged youth, a partnership with a vocational school that trained mechanics from rough backgrounds. I poured myself into causes I actually cared about. I started speaking at events, not just about entrepreneurship, but about resilience. About how to keep going when everything inside you tells you to quit. About how betrayal isn't the end of the road, it's a detour to somewhere far better than where you were headed. My words started reaching people. Strangers began emailing me, thanking me for sharing what I'd been through, telling me they were inspired. And every time I received one of those messages, I remembered where it all started. A broken man sitting alone in a silent apartment, wondering what was wrong with him. Nothing had been wrong with me. I just gave my heart to someone who didn't know how to hold it. One evening, I attended a high-profile industry event where I was being honored for innovative leadership in business transformation. It felt surreal, standing there under the lights, cameras flashing, people clapping, and my name on the screen. The guy who once couldn't afford new tires for his car was now being celebrated by the very world that used to look down on him. But what made it even more surreal was who I saw standing near the back of the room. Her. She wasn't dressed like she used to be, no designer bags, no loud jewelry, no look-at-me confidence. Just quiet clothes and quiet eyes. She didn't approach me that night, and I didn't make any move either. But I noticed her watching during the speech. I noticed her expression shift as I spoke, not with arrogance, but with purpose. I spoke about how sometimes the worst moments in your life end up unlocking the best parts of you. How sometimes the people who walk away are just making space for the version of you that you were always meant to become. And as I scanned the room and saw the faces of my team, my friends, the people who helped me build this life, I realized something else. She was no longer a part of the equation. Not even in the background. Her chapter in my story had already ended. It was the pain she caused that opened the door, sure, but I had long since stepped through it and shut it behind me. After the event, I got in my car and drove through the city. Not aimlessly, but thoughtfully. I passed the old apartment where we once lived. It looked smaller than I remembered. Dimmer. Like a version of life I could no longer imagine myself fitting into. I parked for a moment across the street and just stared at it. I remembered the fights. The quiet dinners. The way she used to look at me like I was the backup plan. And then I thought of where I was now. Who I was now. I couldn't help but smile. Not out of pettiness, but pride. Because I had earned this. Every inch of it. I went home that night and wrote in my journal. Something I hadn't done in months. Just one line. She doubted me, so I doubled down. It was simple, but it captured everything. The entire journey. The fall. The fight. The rise. And most importantly, the freedom. The next morning I had a new message. From her again. This time longer. She said she had been thinking about everything. That she realized she'd been chasing the wrong things. That the life she ran toward wasn't what she thought it would be. Her words were careful, remorseful, almost poetic. She said I was the only person who ever truly saw her. And that she was sorry for all of it. But I didn't feel the pull to reply. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction or longing. I felt complete. Because my story no longer needed her involvement. I had closed the loop. The man she left behind was never coming back, and the man I had become didn't need to look back. Instead of replying, I closed my phone, opened my laptop, and returned to planning our next big expansion. That was where my energy belonged now, in building what came next. Because this life, the one I had carved from pain and turned into power, was only just getting started. Years ago, if someone had told me that being betrayed would become the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have laughed in disbelief. But now, sitting at the head of a boardroom table in a skyscraper with my company's logo on the glass wall behind me, I understand the irony of growth. It's never painless. And it rarely happens in comfort. True transformation, the kind that rewires you, strengthens you, and elevates you, happens when you're cracked wide open. When you're forced to face the truth that someone you loved never saw your value and you have to choose whether to break or rebuild. I chose to rebuild. And not for revenge. Not even for success. I did it because I refused to let someone else's limited vision of me become the ceiling of my life. The company had now expanded into 4 cities. We had contracts with international clients. We were sponsoring racing teams, developing proprietary tuning software, and collaborating with luxury brands. My days were full but fulfilling. I no longer worked from pain, I worked from purpose. I woke up every day excited to push boundaries, to give people jobs, to create something lasting. And in the quiet moments when I remembered how far I'd come, I didn't think about her with bitterness. I thought about her as a chapter, a necessary one, that taught me what self-worth really means. She reached out one final time. A long message. No poetic metaphors this time. Just raw honesty. She told me her boss had moved on quickly after their fling fizzled out. That her job never felt stable again after their affair. That coworkers talked behind her back. That she'd lost the respect she once carried so confidently. And that every time she saw my name in the press or online, it reminded her of what she had walked away from, what she had destroyed with her own hands. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, didn't want anything from me, just needed to say it. That she was proud of me. That she finally saw it now, what I had always been becoming. I read her words slowly. I felt no hate, no desire to hurt her, no desire to offer comfort either. What I felt was closure. Not just for me, but maybe for her too. Maybe it was the ending she needed to accept what she had lost. But for me, it had ended a long time ago when I stopped needing to be seen by her to believe in myself. And the beautiful thing about peace is that it doesn't come from proving them wrong, it comes from living right. From creating a life that reflects the truth you always carried inside you. A life that says, I didn't just survive what you did, I turned it into something unstoppable. Later that week, I gave a talk at a leadership summit. The theme was reinvention. I spoke about the night I found out about her affair, about the words she used to cut me down, and how those words became the foundation of everything I built. I watched a room full of people, some nodding, some wiping tears, some sitting still, processing their own silent pain. And I told them what I wish someone had told me back then. You don't rise by proving someone wrong. You rise by becoming someone they could never bring down again. After the event, a man approached me with tears in his eyes. He said his wife had left him recently for someone she worked with, and he had been spiraling, thinking his best days were behind him, that he wasn't enough. I looked him in the eye and said, you are more than enough. She just couldn't see it. But that doesn't mean it isn't true. What matters now is that you see it and you build from there. That night, I walked home with a sense of calm that I hadn't felt even during the peaks of my success. Because what I had now wasn't just a company, or wealth, or recognition. What I had was wholeness. And that can't be taken, stolen, or broken. It's earned. It's lived. So to anyone listening who's been underestimated, abandoned, or betrayed, let this be your sign. You don't need to chase the ones who walked away. Let them go. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh. Let them cheat. Let them doubt. And while they're busy with all of that, build quietly, patiently, fiercely. And one day, without even trying, you'll wake up and realize that you no longer care if they ever see your worth. Because you already do. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own journey, or inspired you to begin again, leave a comment and tell me. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, raw, honest, and real, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because this is just one chapter and there's so much more ahead.